Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. For the second half of our class in this first week of the 3-class series that we're embarking on, focusing a little bit more in on the Tibetan side of Buddhism, and next week, as I said, the Zen side of Buddhism, and their correlatives and their connections with the Vedanta and all Indian darshanas. You'll find that even Jainism and Sikhism, Saurism, and other Indian darshanas are in concurrence with a lot of these. Of course, the Jains, in terms of karma and reincarnation, are a very good philosophy to study, very good religion to study. They're extremely nonviolent. They take a very Buddhistic type of approach. In Tibet, though, as we are beginning to ponder, I wanted to bring up this teachings on the Bardo states, which here is something that I learned from Jamgon Khyentse Rinpoche, who's no longer with us, but I think his incarnation is back by now, because, of course, they look at it in terms of conscious births, as we've been talking about in the first half. And basically, people passing from the body are waiting for two things. They're waiting for the karma that brought them into the body to wind down, which doesn't mean that they're going to be karma-free, because they still have a lot of karma called sanchita to work out. But their prarabdha karma is being worked out. That's the karma of that lifetime. Sanchita, rather like arrows held in a scabbard, and prarabdha being like arrow already loose from the bow. It's got to have its effect. So people passing from the body are waiting for that karma that's called prarabdha to wind down, so that they can get out of the body. That's number one. The second thing they're waiting for is their next body, because we're all choosers as long as we're in the embodiment process. Some of us are good choosers, and some of us are poor choosers, and some of us are sort of in between. So whatever the case may be, everyone has a inclination, or a divine inclination on one side, and a sort of aberrant tendency on the other to go towards matter. We've described that. Vishishta's way of saying that was that if the senses and mind are kept pure, then Kundalini Shakti would like to sport through that form. Otherwise, she won't. And in the case of that, then you're sort of left to your own devices. And that's a person who chooses their parents, their country, their life, the circumstances of their life, and the relationships, people that they're going to meet or have to meet. In the case of people who have karmas together with one another that aren't resolved at the end of a previous lifetime, like, say, the kings and queens of England, or souls that are like pods of whales or packs of wolves. They get together and manifest lifetime to lifetime with one another too. So incarnation happens on a collective level as well as an individual level, and also a cosmic level. So that's 3 levels that embodiment's taking place on. Very fascinating subject, very rich subject, and the Tibetan Buddhists have spent a long time pondering it. It's one of the facets of India, because I don't see any difference between India and Buddhism. It's one of the facets of India that Tibetan Buddhism has thrown a spotlight on, so that we have some definitive information about it. It's a relative law, no doubt. There are Advaitic and non-dual schools of Buddhism too that would prefer to just think about Buddha nature, or just go towards Satori or Zen, get the highest realization, take the essence only and leave the non-essence aside. But being a relative law, especially for a culture like America or like Europe in these times, it's very important for us to look toward the wisdom traditions and get these clues to conscious embodiment, which will then entail also conscious death. So that's what this is about. Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche was one of the best English speakers of all the Tibetans I ever met, and could give very clear teachings. Talk about the palette of conscious future lives. He had this clear mind and clear language down pat, and he could speak to you very well, whereas beings like Karmapa or Dalai Lama in the early days needed translators to get those teachings across. So it was beautiful. Actually, Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche, I think, was acting as translator for Karmapa on that time I got my initiation from Karmapa. So he had a very lucid way of explaining these things. And so I managed to fashion a chart out of some of his main teachings on the Bardo states. There's a semblance of the idea of Bardo state in Christianity. You call it purgatory or other things like that, where the soul has a sort of restive state. It has a sort of indeterminate state, held between the worlds. Bardos are like worlds or realms. Also, very much associated with time. Bardo has to be a series of time, like from your kindergarten to your 6th grade was a Bardo, and your high school was a Bardo, and your college was a Bardo, if you want to put it in terms of worldly activities and earthly undertakings. So these Bardo states are not just inward spiritual states, they're also very much prevalent outside. So he told us, this teaching is extraordinarily important for our present day world, because today we live with widespread conditions of distraction that weaken our ability to concentrate fully upon whatever practice we are engaged in. He said that in 1980 when I saw him. So that was before the cell phones and computer age gluts and all that was going on. There was distraction even back then. There's always distraction. 9 of them, actually. The father of yoga calls them the 9 vikshepas or antaryayas, the distractions to spiritual life. 2 are physical, 3 are mental, 1's intellectual, and 2 are spiritual. So on all levels of our being, there's these distractions. Even on the spiritual level, you get these distractions that keep you from realizing the ultimate. This center, for instance, has a poison in it. All the centers have nectars and poisons, if you look at the Kundalini system. So there's a poison there called disorientation. A bird flies so high that it loses track of the earth, you see, and all of a sudden it doesn't know which way is up and which way is down. So there are acclimatizations that have to happen. And experience of death is one of those. You see by this beautiful way he expresses it here, which we'll get into. But suffice to say, he thinks this is a precious teaching for this present day world because of this widespread distractions that are going on, even more now, 20 years, 30 years after he said it. Well, there's that word I mentioned earlier. I think Buddha, did you say there was a God? Did I say there was a God? There is a God. Did I say there was a God? Then there is no God. Did I say there wasn't a God? You couldn't pin him down. You would not commit. And of course there's many fine reasons not to commit. But that word Tathagata is one of them that's used. And Swami Vivekananda also said that he used the word pragyaparam, supreme intelligence, for God. And we were talking about it, actually a question today, whether to use the word God or Brahman or Allah and so forth. So here's the quote about Tathagata. It pervades all beings in quantity as well as quality. It sounds very much like Atman in Vedanta, you see. The Atman is the same in everyone and everything, even in the tree. The tree has Atman as its backdrop, so does the human being. But the human being is a much better station, much more sentient and wise station with which to realize the Atman. That's the only thing. It's degree of manifestation that becomes important, rather than drawing these immature conclusions about quantity and quality. It is primordial essence which is never defiled. It becomes obscured, however, when an individual engages in negative activity and thus accumulates karma, which presents recognition of it. So there you have the key words I've been talking about in the first half of our class, basically, wasn't it? Obscured. That's the power of obscuration, avarana shakti. And vikshepa, distraction, or distortion. Distraction's a good one too. Also, the word comes up here, recognition. Pratyabhigya in Sanskrit. It's a huge word for remembrance of our divine nature, or recognition of what is. You could use either of those definitions for that word, pratyabhigya. It's a huge word in Tantra. They say pratyabhigya is really almost realization. It is enlightenment. When you recognize a thing, that gives you the aha moment, see, the epiphany. And if you're qualified to comprehend and digest that moment as it occurs to you, then that's immediate realization. Jata samadhi, or sahaja samadhi, something that happens really naturally to you with just a few words or just a deep insight. But you have to be qualified for that to happen. So these are great words in this quote about Tathagata, this divine essence in everything. It would be the same like our Atman or Paramatman. Well, let's get into the actual subject of the teachings of the Bardo state, because the subtitle there is the Bardo of birth and death, or death and rebirth, actually. Here's finally somebody who tells us more specifically the dynamics of what happens at the time of death and before your next rebirth, because usually by the time you find out about the teachings of reincarnation and rebirth, you've already been born. And you're already living that karma that you should have known about prior to having experienced it. So it's getting a little late in the game, as they say. So all of this here in this palette of future lives, the subtitle for this is, I was thinking of a expression out of my childhood: straighten up and fly right. Isn't that it? Wasn't that it? Your parents used to tell you, straighten up and fly right. So spiritually speaking, then we have to get our P's and Q's together, dot our I's and cross our T's. We don't cross our I's and dot our T's. We get clear mind, get it all straight. And when we have the cosmology down and when we have the philosophy down, then we can go towards spirituality. Otherwise, you're trying to jump from the lowest step to the highest step, and you don't know any of the steps in between. Even if you managed, if you were a great high jumper, you'd still be letting yourself out of so much richness that you're going to need to know if you're going to take on a body and consciousness again. Remember, they asked Vivekananda after he gave all these teachings in 1893, before he left India, or left America to go back to India, they asked him, should a man be reborn then? We want to know. Give it to us definitively. He said, I certainly hope he will not. Not till he can do so in full consciousness. So they were standing and talking to a man who had been reborn in full consciousness, standing there right in front of them. And he only lived 39 years of full consciousness in the body. So this is a Nityasiddha, internally perfect soul. The art has been learned long ago and has been used all this time. As far as we know, from what we can glean from the tradition, he might have had another birth as a great Buddhist teacher 700 years earlier, 700 to 1,000 years earlier. There was some mention made of him having a deep meditation in which he realized himself as this great being. that led thousands of beings, and was a Buddhist teacher. So now you know probably why Sri Sharda Devi said, Swami Vivekananda is a person who sits like a wooden statue for 700 years at a time in meditation. So this is a person who can get absorbed, and bodies can come and bodies can go, but he never leaves his seat. And that physical asana is not what I'm talking about. It's the mental asana that's important. The mental asana is one and indivisible. You see, all of these are there in it. You see, the whole palette: clear mind, intelligence, capacity, ability, strong will, intention, pure intentions, and all that, all there inside of a being like that. So, the first rule of thumb for Jamgon Khyentse Rinpoche is here. He says, it's right next to that great symbol of fearlessness. Only with fearlessness can we maintain mindfulness and awareness free of distinction. So, this is why we have to enter into the time of the bardo of our death with fearlessness. The main thing that happens over here, as you see, is panic in the early time. There's the word panic. Those lacking in training may panic here. That's when earth dissolves into water. That's when basically you're trying to withdraw your senses that have been attached to nature for so long. 5 senses from the 5 elements. You're trying to successfully withdraw that, renounce the world, which of course it would have been better if you had have done that a long time ago. But in the case of those beings who are trying to get their first conscious death, then they're beginning to panic because that's a very painful process, and they're not able to control their senses. Now you can see the yogic teachings, right? And the Gita, Sri Krishna, the 5 horses and the chariot. It's all about controlling the senses. If you had done that early and had attained that in life, then it's not going to be that difficult for you to do it at death. But you'll need fearlessness. Remember? Jai Vireshwara, Jai Tripurari, Gaye Hamu Sab Mahima Teri. Jai Vireshwara, Jai Tripurari, Gaye Hamu Sab Mahima Teri. Jai Ho, Vivekananda, and so forth and so forth. So, he's talking about this beautiful soul called Swami Vivekananda, Vireshwara, the manifestation of Shiva. It's the name for Shiva, Vireshwara, who is really a combination of Lord Buddha and Lord Shiva. So look at him, his 2 recent births, you might say. See that he combined the best of Buddhism and the best of tantric yogiism and Vedanta. So also he's singing about fearlessness, you see. Abai is a beautiful song where he sings about fearlessness, where he says, we shall crush the stars to atoms, we shall unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We are the children of Sri Ramakrishna. So, crush the stars to atoms means dissolve everything in space and time back into the self. Unhinge the universe. We will see through the cycles of birth and death as being a kala chakra, a mere wheel of time, and we'll transcend them. In other words, creation, preservation, and destruction are all going on in 2 hands called projection and withdrawal, you see. Like a tempest in a teapot, these are going on. And you're the witness of them. So that kind of fearlessness is going to be needed, and it's enjoined upon the soul who enters into this conscious death process in 3 phases. The bardo between death and rebirth takes place in 3 phases. Some 7 days first, there. Some 14 days is the second phase, and then finally the 28 days is the duration. Hopefully you won't need that much. If you're a living liberated soul, or you've done this before, you've been born consciously and you've died previously consciously. You've learned your lessons. You've studied the scriptures. You've meditated. You've had some definitive experience of your true nature. You know the self, know the truth, and the truth has set you free. Then you should be able to see the Buddha nature light the minute you exit the body. That's what Vivekananda said. I'm sure that I'll find it very beautiful to get out of my body, because immediately the light of Brahman will be available, will be shining there for him. The minute the veils drop away, veils of body, veils of energy, veils of thought, veils of intelligence, and veils of ego, the purastika body, as soon as those fall away, then the light of Brahman is shining behind them. They were all wax figurines, but the light was shining through them all, as Ramakrishna said when he visited the wax museum. I see that's just like my samadhi. Everything's made of wax, but there's a light shining in it. So that's that Tathagata, or that Buddha nature, that Atman that's shining. So that light becomes apparent to you right away, and then you go to it. And that's actually what the Rinpoche is telling the dead Tibetan man. You see, the children are crying, the wife's crying. He says, leave the room. And they say, why? Because you're crying and he'll hear you. But he's dead. No, he's not dead. He's got subtle senses. Don't you have subtle senses and dream tonight? You think the physical senses are all there is? He's hanging around the body, as it were. See? We think hovering over it, but that's astral projection. He's actually inside it still. He's still deeper inside of the real body, called the subtle body. It's the mind body he's gone into. And he's still aware, because of his subtle senses, of everything outward, because he hasn't withdrawn his energy yet from the form. So he's there at the bedside of his Tibetan student, who is an old man, probably, who's passed away now. And he's guiding him by reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You've heard it before, and you know something about it, I'm sure. So, to define the dynamics of it, he says, that is, Rinpoche here says, all three of these phases offer an opportunity to recognize the nature of mind and attain enlightenment. The void illuminating mind. That's the view of Tibetan Buddhism. That's, the Mahamudra teaching, you see. So the view is that all phenomena is manifestation of the mind. That's the view. If you take that view, all of a sudden you're at odds with other views, you see. Like creation theory, that doesn't work. Nothing ever got created, and nothing ever gets destroyed. And if I'm out of my physical body, I can see that very clearly now. And that I have given up the body, and I will take on another now. Thank you very much. See? As Holy Mother said, nothing follows you after death, just your actions. God and devil aren't on your heels after you die. God and devil are inside of you. So what follows you after you die is your actions, good and bad. So what you want to do is neutralize good and bad. Good and bad are chains that hold, one of iron, one of gold. So your good karmas are bringing you back as a good moral, ethical person who doesn't know anything about his past lifetime. Good, pure, ethical person who knows nothing about the spiritual process and is still believing in silly things like eternal damnation and the 7-day creation theory and other superstitions. So get a clue. See? Get a clue from your true nature. Wake up and see how much power you have available to yourself, or potential, and make it available to yourself. This is called empowerment in Tibetan Buddhism. You don't just go and hear somebody give a great talk and walk away and say, oh, I'm empowered. And you go up afterwards and talk to the person, you get initiation, you get a mantra, you start practicing. That's empowerment. That's when the empowerment happens. You can't walk away from some 1,000-soul general overall empowerment initiation and think that you're going to end up with this kind of knowledge, this kind of attainment, this is rare. At least we'd like to make it less rare. But in this day and age, it's rare especially amongst Western people. I would probably be tempted to say that it's becoming more and more rare amongst the Hindus, too. They're getting more worldly. So, the bardo of the moment of death is a duration of some 7 days long. You think, oh, it's over, I'll get it over with quick, see. Just, in whatever way. Have some raspy breathing for 8 hours and kick the frame. But it's actually a 7-day process in most cases. And he says here, because it's earth dissolving into water. And earth dissolving into water means also your sense of taste and your sense of smell are involved. Because earth connects with smell, water connects with taste. So you've got 4 elements there you're trying to separate them from. And if you are in your subtle senses, and you're aware of subtle senses, it should be easier for you to do that. If you're only aware of gross senses, it's not going to be easy for you to do that because you have no concept of that your dream state was actually a state of your awareness, and you didn't make it lucid. You didn't render it lucid. Somebody wrote me a couple weeks ago, how do I make my dreaming state lucid? I said, by making your waking state lucid. How do you think? You think you can control your dreams? Who's ever been able to do that? Make your waking state lucid. That's A of Om. And your U of Om is dreaming. And your M of Om is deep sleep. So make your waking state lucid. Your dreams will become lucid. And you'll get into deep sleep. And realize that it's a kind of samadhi. They call it swapna. I'm sorry, sushupti. Sushupti samadhi. It's a kind of samadhi, deep sleep. But you have to bring your consciousness to bear. And actually that's what this dying Tibetan man here, you see, is having in 7 days, 14 days, and 28 days. He's coming in and out of consciousness. So he's no different than he was in the body when he was waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Now he's outside the body, or inside his soul, in his subtle body. And he's actually also coming in and out of awareness, just like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep is happening to him. But he's got an advantage of that voice of the Rinpoche talking to him. Don't go toward that vulture's body. Stay away from the womb. Or if you do, get a womb with a view. You see. Trying to guide him towards higher things. So here's the description. Those lacking training may panic here. It is important to understand that awareness is not changing, only the elements are dissolving. Now, dissolving the mind stream meditation that we've been teaching in SRV means that you dissolve the elements back into your senses, and you dissolve your senses back into your subtle senses. You actually do this in meditation each morning. I was talking to one of my students who's been doing that for about 3 or 4 months now. Every meditation he's been doing this dissolution process mentally, and then coming back out of his meditation by so he's actually practicing the stations of consciousness, how they were incepted, and how they originated, and how they moved forward, and how they manifested, and then how they, just like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep every day, or in-breath, held breath, and out-breath, how that happens in cycles all the time. So he's actually becoming conversant with the movements of his own consciousness. Consciousness here with a small c, called mind. Consciousness with an uppercase C does not move. So make sure you hold that sacrosanct and don't mix up karma and reincarnation with it. Once you realize that, this will be a dream. In fact, it'll be a dream that you have awoken from and that you will no longer participate in. As they sing, and we like to sing so often, Namrichor Nashanka Name Jati Beda Pita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Majana Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham Om. So, Namrit Chorna Shanka, I have no death. Why? Name Jati Beta, because I was never born. Pita Naiva Me Naiva, I have no mother, father. Mata Majanmaha, nor mother. I have no birth, Janma. So, Chidananda Rupaha, I'm birthless, deathless. I am the bliss of consciousness that never enters into the birth and death process. Never enters into it. It's always transcended. See? Otherwise, you end up singing this instead. Kamalakanta Haye Branta Ule Shonama Shanadir Bare Bare Ashi Duka Rashi Rashi Bare Bare Ashi Duka Rashi Rashi Jatane Shabe Arkadin Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin Taji Anyobo and so forth. He says, bewildered by Maya, Kamalakanta, the singer of this song, has forgotten the 9 months and 9 days of suffering in his mother's womb. Misery and pain are the outcome of ignorant existence. How many more lives of ignorance can I bear? How about that for the lyrics of your song? This man is awakening up to the predicament of his soul, caught in the chains of birth and death. See, and he doesn't want that anymore. How many more lives of ignorance can I bear? So he needs to inform himself, first of all, that the soul is birthless and deathless, his Atman, his Tathagata, his Buddha nature. And second of all, he has to take steps to realize that. Not enough just to say, hemp, 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 hemp. See, I have to smoke it to get high. I don't smoke, but Sri Ramakrishna used that as an example. Or he said, it's not enough just to say, burn, bush, burn, after the thorny bush sticks you. You have to go get wood, set the thing afire. So that's the follow-through onto realization. To gain enlightenment, to do the practices after you hear the truth. Shravana. Then manana, work it through your mind. Nididhyasa, realize it through your practice. And then you won't be in this predicament that this man is in, suffering, and having to rely on another source to try and guide him through it. But he's fortunate. So he's feeling the external sign of weakness and an internal sign of foggy perception. This is what happens when you try and draw the senses of smell and the senses of taste from earth and water. Foggy perception happens and weakness. You feel weak. And they say, oh, I'm dying. No, you're not dying. Consciousness never changes. Isn't that what he says here? It's important to recognize this as an opportunity to attain enlightenment. And he says, do not panic. Consciousness does not change. The elements are just dissolving, that's all. And you're doing the dissolving. Do a good job of dissolving them. Otherwise, we know earth and water just turns into mud. Well, do a very good job of dissolving them. Then water dissolves into fire. Your external sign, all of a sudden you start experiencing dryness of mouth, dryness of eyes, and dreamlike experiences internally. Foggy wisps of things, like scenes coming back to you, like 1,000 imbecilities of the mind taking over. He says, all experiences become like mirages, and moving images take on a dreamlike nature. So even if you're still in your senses a little bit, people moving about the room, it all seems just sort of like a dream, and you're divorced from it. Then fire dissolves into air, and you lose all your warmth. That's why you say, I'm cold, bring more blankets, you see. And your consciousness now becomes unstable, sort of like a candle in a windy place. You know that beautiful quote in the Gita? Deepo nivatasto ningate sopama smritaha, like a candle in a windless place. Well, this is the opposite of that. Here's a candle in a windy place. Your consciousness is a candle and it's being threatened to be blown out by death. He says, consciousness appears like a flame, but is unsteady due to the constant movement. Then air dissolves into ether, or the space of consciousness, you could say. And the external sign of this is it's all exhalation and there's no more inhalation. That's it. One long exhalation. And you sever the silver cord and you're through with the cage of bone and flesh. The internal sign is awareness is a steady light. So now you get that glimpse of light you're looking for. Imagine how unfortunate it would have been to panic and lose awareness before you got to that final stage. See? Before you were able to see that steady light. So he says, awareness becomes like a lamp, is no longer disturbed by wind. So you persevere. You ride the prana inward. Now if you've done breathing exercises, if you've studied the prana, if you've realized that the prana is really Shakti in another form, if you've had teachings about the prana, if you've meditated and used the prana, the upward moving prana to gain wisdom, because there's 5 pranas and one of them's upward moving, like your in-breath, so you're like the beginning of a sneeze, and there's also the beginning of wisdom. So you can gain that upward moving prana and gain knowledge with that. So if you've done those kinds of practices while you were living, then it's easier at the time of your death you'll have control over those certain aspects of prana. It won't be such a task for you. Now at that point, there is the duration of some 14 days. Lights of 5 colors appear associated with the 5 Buddha kalas and the various deities. That is, he explains further, deities emanating through mandalas appear in peaceful and wrathful aspects representing emptiness or clarity. This is, of course, famous Tibetan Buddhist Thangka type of stuff, where you see the Buddha fields and you have darshan with the deities. It's very particular to Tibetan Buddhism. It's not found so much in Zen or in Madhyamaka and other forms of Buddhism that are not so concerned with the deities. But deity yoga is very big in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's good that there is a form of Buddhism that teaches us that. So mandalas, you've heard of mandalas, of course, so like the 7 rishis of India form one mandala of souls, and they preside over the 7 lokas. So there are correlations we know of even back in Vedic times of this kind of ideation. So some 14 days, to summate it here for you, is that you're seeing lights. You're seeing, sometimes they call those the Shambhala worlds or the rainbow worlds. And they're actually realms of existence, lokas, inside of you. And you're trying to identify with them. You're trying to find a birth there. If you can find a birth there, you will not have to be born in a physical body again. So it's sort of like Bur, Bhuvaswar, Janaha, Tapahar, Mahaloka, and Brahmaloka. If Bur, Bhuvaswahar, if that's earth, lower heaven, and higher heaven, generally speaking, and ancestors, humans and ancestors, if you cannot transcend those, then you just go around in the circle of your ancestors. One of the things Lord Buddha was trying to transcend and break through was that cycle of rebirth, 3rd chakra stuff, first 3 chakras. So if you can break through into the heart chakra, then you're at a realm that you won't need to take on a physical birth anymore. Or if you want to take on a physical birth, you can do it as a matter of choice with your powers intact. And there you see, great souls that can do that. Semi-great souls, let's call them, because there are deeper and further realizations to have. Pretty simple, that duration of 14 days. The duration of 28 days later is a rather unfortunate thing. The Bardo of becoming. That is, you haven't realized yourself as pure being, so you're going to have to return to the dream of becoming. And he says here, lights of lesser intensities appear, not those 5 colors, those rainbow lights, but lesser intensities of lights. They're associated with the 6 modes of existence, and one relives the deeds of the past life. There are, of course, correlations in Christianity and other religions in that regard, that you have to read the record of your life. They call it sometimes the Akashic record. And the Akashas actually are 5, at least 5 Akashas they talk about. So you're reading the record of the Bhutakasha. People don't know this very often, but they hear something about the Akashic record and they think, oh, that's just reading, the history of the world or something, or the past, present, and future. But actually, the Akashic records is happening at 5 different levels of space, like 5 little Russian dolls put back inside of each other. We have a chart on that. So, whatever the case may be, or however you would describe it in your particular tradition, this means you're looking at the karmas, the actions that you did. And as Holy Mother said, actions follow you after birth. Nothing else follows you. God isn't coming after you. Devil isn't out to get you. Those are all inside for you to meet yet. In fact, devil is going to be a wrathful deity in Tibetan Buddhism, and you see a wrathful deity, that's a good thing, because that scares the bejesus out of you, and gives you a challenge, and you face off the challenge, and the guardian, the gate, lets you through. You see. So fearlessness, he started out saying that at the beginning, didn't he? Fearlessness. With fearlessness, one can maintain mindfulness and be free of distractions, which he started out at the very top saying, distraction is one of the worst problems of the day. So it's all connected very nicely in this teaching. He says, explains further about the Bardo of becoming. If a man fails to recognize Buddha nature, then he is prepared to be reborn in one of the 6 realms of rebirth. So this is, they say, a duration of some 28 days. Of course, these durations are general assignments, depending on the soul, how much time they're going to take, how much karma they have to work out, or how free of karma, how much capacity they have, how much spiritual attainment they have under their belt. These will all vary according to those factors. So, backing up just a minute, you see that this whole time here on your so-called deathbed is an excellent time to realize Buddha nature. Better for you, well, I can actually read this quote, which would be better. If you practice hard enough, you can gain enlightenment in this life, and that is best. If your practice in this life was guided by a spiritual teacher, then you will experience the clear light at the time of death and recognize the nature of mind. If that does not happen, there is a possibility to do so after death. That's there. There are practices that one can do at the time of death. A spiritual master can also introduce the dying person to the Bardo in such a way that he or she will recognize the clear light when it occurs. One of the great problems is recognizing the light when it happens to you. They say if an owl looks at the sun, it just sees a black space, you see. So that's an ignorant person, Lord Vashishta says. Light all around it, but it can't see it. So it's a good analogy for a soul who is there in the light, but cannot recognize it. So second best to have practiced it in while you were living, to recognize the light in meditation and so forth. Best of all, to have done it, gain enlightenment first in that lifetime that you practiced. So you can see here, they keep coming up with this expression, the nature of mind, the nature of mind. So they call it the void illuminating mind. But you can look at it the other way and say the nature of mind is manas, is constant change, is constant duality, where pleasure and pain are always interacting, virtue and vice always interacting. And that's the nature of ordinary mind. So quite often when they say recognize the nature of mind, they're talking about a two-part thing. The unreal never is, the real never ceases to be, is how Krishna put it thousands of years before Buddhism. So a twofold thing is that reality is one thing and unreality is another. The wheat and the chaff, Purusha and Prakriti, the transcendent and the relative, the unchanging and the ephemeral. So many ways in which one has to make that one prime distinction called viveka, and then live free from then on. That's the beginning of a spiritual life, viveka. Dancing, singing, so forth. Some asanas, a little breathing exercise, is not a spiritual life. Spiritual life really truly begins when you have honed discrimination, viveka, and you can see the difference between the changing and the unchanging, and you adhere to the unchanging. Just like this man should be adhering to the Buddha light and letting all other karmas and forms go, like phantoms that they are. If they appear phantom-like to you in the dream, then let them go in the dream and wake up. O dreamer, awake, you must, you must. There's a famous song in India. O dreamer, awake, you must, you must. Well, in one fell swoop then, we covered the teachings of the Bardo states in a very short time. It's of course going to take more of your time to contemplate it. And as he said here, find a teacher that can transmit this to you, and so that you will have an advantage on death when it comes. And then you can stand up and say to death, I have received a command from my Divine Mother that you have to die, death. You must die. So I put death in its own grave. My teacher used to say that a lot. Now, in accord with some of these teachings, and in the time remaining, I wanted to show you one of these karma charts. Here, I have it up here. As we started talking about the four types of karma when we mentioned sanchita, karma and reincarnation being relative laws, but so important, Dalai Lama says, if we begin to look into them as Westerners, then we will solve our problems at the emotional level, at the psychological level, at the philosophical level. We'll solve all our problems because this one lifetime scenario is keeping us from thinking outside the box. In religion, in science, everywhere, it's a great limitation. So, therefore, acknowledging karma and reincarnation as relative laws, we look into them, we find out that the seers are talking about four kinds of karma. Usually it's three: sanchita, prarabdha, and agami, past, present, and future. And so named after the three phases of time. But there's a fourth karma in there, you can see that I've inserted, called kriyamani. Kriyamani karma is like arrows being taken from the scabbard. You know, they're coming from nowhere. This karma is rising up from who knows where. And this nowadays we call it putting out fires, because we're trying to, or distraction if you want, put it in Jangkang Khantrul's way of speaking. We're trying to work out the karma that we took on when we came into this life. Of course, we've forgotten that it was us that incepted the body and us that got into it, that we took on the body, and it's all our own responsibility. And we're trying to palm it off on someone else, bad parenting or God or devil or whatever. And we've sort of forgotten the we have to take our own responsibility for it. So when we come to that understanding, then we begin to neutralize our karmas. As we try and do so, this Kriyamani karma rises up and takes us off in different directions. Very difficult aspect of karma. But you can see there, accumulated karma or past karma is arrows being held in the scabbard. Prarabdha karma is arrows already loose from the bow. That's karma that you're living right now, that you have to experience. There's no way around it. Kriyamani karma is imminent. It's arrows being taken from the scabbard. And of course, Agami karma is arrows being loaded into the bow. So that's future karma. And that's why I wanted to come up with this, some way of speaking to that idea of conscious future lives in the chart that we looked at in the first half. So knowing about these 4 types of karma, we can begin to work at dissolution. They say in different levels it comes. Attenuation, it means to modify it some so that you can get some wiggle room in your own mind. But then you can also neutralize it. You can dissolve it completely too. That's the ideal. And as you gain more capacity for neutralizing karma, then you can take whole portions of your sanchita karma and bring it forward into a life and dissolve it. Sometimes we see Maya is causing things to look different than they really are. We said that's that vikshepa or distortion. It causes something to look different than what it really is. So sometimes you see a person suffering very badly. That could be because they're just working out a whole lot of their karma at that time. And it's a positive thing. Like I was saying, people at the end of their life sometimes waiting to die. In that waiting period, they're actually working out karmas that are keeping them in the body. So you can't hurry them along with some sort of death serum or something, you see. Oh, I wish you wouldn't suffer so much. You should let that process work itself out, because there's some very internal things that the soul doesn't even know about that are being worked out. So hands off would be the best, in most cases, would be the best approach. How many or more lifetimes of suffering can I bear? When I get tired of suffering, I won't bear anymore. That's what will happen. There you see the great archer and the great avatar, Sri Ram. We mentioned him earlier, and the beautiful songs we sometimes sing about him. Shri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajamana Harana Bhavaya Daruram Navakancha Lotana Kancha Mukakara Kancha Parakandaranam Shri Ram, Shri Ram, Shri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajamana Harana Bhavaya Daruram. He's really the earliest of all avatars. You can't think of anyone on record that was earlier than Sri Ram, even prior to Krishna. So in this very ancient age, and Lord Vashishta being his teacher, this great soul that we looked at, one of his quotes earlier, we see Sri Ram has lived so long and has had such a long-standing line of avataric descent that he's probably the best one to go to when you have questions about karma. Karma which is inexorable, karma which is inscrutable. Karma is just like a mass of jungle or a mass of underwater creepers and that the diver cannot penetrate through. See, so it's very indeterminate and very difficult to see through. So these are clarifying topics. If you know there are 4 types of karma: accumulated, operative, imminent, and potential, then you can do something. And the best teaching about karma is that it frees you from bondage. It may be sobering at first, but you understand eventually that thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. So let go thy hold. And at that point you will become adept at destroying karma, and you'll begin to get into an artistic way of looking at life. Paint a palette of your own design. Paint a canvas of your own design with this multifaceted palette of divine qualities. There are also 4 shades of karma. Black, white, black and white, and colorless. It's a nice teaching. We always hear about good and bad karma. And those are fairly easy to recognize. Again, recognition being a very important teaching. So everyone can recognize bad karma and stay away from it. Everyone can recognize good karma and benefit by it. The most stultifying of all karmas is black and white, mixed. So the quote under mixed karma is, motivated karma is far inferior to that performed with equanimity of mind. Take refuge in evenness of mind, for wretched are the result seekers. Learn to do everything as an offering to me. Thus shall you be free from the bondage of actions yielding good and bad results. If you're talking about it in terms of the gunas, then you want to get beyond tamas, slothfulness, to restlessness. Then you want to get beyond restlessness to balance. But you don't want to stay in balance. It's the interesting facet of that teaching of the gunas, which is peculiar to Hinduism. The teaching of the gunas to Vedanta is that beyond balance is called pure sattva or transcendence. And that's going to be beyond any quality of nature. So you're actually transcending nature and its various allurements and traps when you get beyond balanced mind. If you just remain in balanced mind, then you tend to live a happy life. And pleasures, everything is fairly even keel, you see. We see people living those kinds of lives, but enlightenment doesn't come to them. They have to go beyond the sattva guna to get that. And when you do, then you would understand what colorless karma is. He says here, that one whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who has subdued his self, that's of course the ego self, from whose desire has disappeared, that one, by renunciation, attains the supreme state of freedom from action. That was really the name of my teacher, Swami Asheshananda. It means pretty much freedom from any karmic residue left over after life. So, will not be dragged back into the body again by unresolved karmas. Colorless karma, in Zen, they talk about that as bird flying through the sky, or Roshi walks over rice paper and doesn't leave a wrinkle. See, my Roshi walks over rice paper and doesn't leave a wrinkle. So that means the person who moves through life without accumulating any karma, so will not have to pay any karmic debt during life or at the end of life when he drops the body. So that goes very well, colorless karma, with this palette of future lives and the consciousness one wants to engender when one is doing their spiritual practice. Bad and white karma are so well known that I'm not even going to read the quotes under them. Definitely one is better than the other, but again, one can get stuck in good and get bound by a gold chain. The last quote at the bottom is worth reading by Shankara, because you put a Shaivite together with a Vaishnava, Ramchandra being one of the great Vaishnava teachers, an avatar of Vishnu, and Shankara being a great Amsa avatar of Shiva. He says, the fire of knowledge destroys that which has previously been done. That's here. And what one has yet to do, that's here. But what is done, that's here, it cannot destroy. But those who stay close to Brahman are never affected by these three. They are Brahman without qualities. So you can destroy past karma and future karma. Future karma is actually easiest to destroy because it will not formulate if you gain teachings and gain enlightenment. So that's what he talks about, the fire of yoga, or the fire of knowledge. That's how to destroy karma quickest and best. Krishna even says that in the Gita. Nahi gyanena sadrishyam pavitramiha vidyate. Know, O Arjuna, that knowledge is the greatest purifier in the world. Gyanena, the greatest purifier in the world. So that will destroy karmas quicker than anything. Devotion, will it destroy karmas? Has to be very intense, otherwise not. Karma, will that destroy karma? Can karma destroy karma? Probably not. You're going to have to get beyond work, get beyond activity, into an actionless state. And will meditation destroy karma? Not its best use. Meditation is for seeing God face to face, not for health, not for destroying karma. So get that thorn of ignorance that is in your flesh out with the thorn of knowledge from the same bush. Extract them and throw them both away. Get rid of ignorance with knowledge and then know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So that is the fire of knowledge and how it works. It's best illustrated through teachings of the Dharma like this, which is why there are so many precious Dharma teachers around who are giving this, and we wish there were more. We have come close enough to let you out for recess early, so we will close here with a chant, and we'll make our announcements after we let our live streaming partners go. Remember, we will come back next week with the Zen Buddhist teachings and their correlation to the Advaita Vedanta. We managed to get a few Tibetan charts in, and we might bring them back in the third. There's a couple more Tibetan charts, the Mahamudra, for instance, which is a very beautiful teaching. And we might bring that back in the third class, which will be 3 Sundays from now. A beautiful, precious teaching of the Dharma in Buddhism. So then we will end here with a chant and move on to our evening activities. Om Sato, Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya, Tamaso Ma Joy Tirgamoya, Mrichorma Amritam Gamaya, Abhira Mayenti, Rudrayate Dakshinamukam, Tenamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.